Okay, so I think today I'm going to take you on the process of editing a fine art print from start to finish. I've edited some of these pictures over here, but I'm going to take this unedited one, we're going to open it, and it's going to go into Adobe Camera Raw because I shot in RAW. And as you can see this picture, I've got like sensor dust on here. And, so what we're going to do is we're going to take this shot, which is a long exposure shot, and we're going to turn this into fine art. So first and foremost, we'll go ahead and get our crop right. I think the horizon line, we just take this and click here and just straighten that horizon. That's just going to make everything from the start out nice, and then we're going to get a good image flow. We've got this nice long bridge that goes out to this building out here. This is the old Coast Guard, and I really like, I did a long exposure. This is probably 30 seconds, and it really made the water nice and ghostly, but the sky is not that interesting. There's no great color and everything. So what we're going to do is we're going to strip all that down to the bare minimums and make it into a fine art piece. So first what I would do is I think I would click auto on here just to see what it thinks. It brightened that up quite a bit. I think that's a good starting point. You can see right here there's a sensor dot, and it's here, you know, just some dust on the sensor. All that's going to go away in editing in Photoshop, so that'll work. I would take and I would go select sky in Adobe Camera Raw or Lightroom. Either one works just fine. And we're going to pull the highlights down. We're going to get a little more contrast into that sky, kind of bring it back. A lot of this we're going to bring up with the exposure, excuse me. So we're going to bring down the highlights and we're going to bring up the exposure just a little bit, kind of give it that mystical look here. Now we're going to do another mask, and this time we'll just do a linear gradient, and we'll come here, and I think what we're going to do here is we're going to bring up the shadows. Let's raise those up a little bit, just get a little bit more detail in there. We could adjust the highlights just a little bit, somewhere in there is fine. You can see it's kind of muddying up this color here. C is the flat water and the little haziness that came in with the tide. So you can adjust the temperature here. None of this is really going to matter too much because, like I said, it will be a black and white image, but I think I'm going to bring some cool tones in here. I'm going to go back to the sky. I'm going to do the same thing there. I'm going to just cool that down just a little bit just to get this sky not be 100% white. Alright, so I think that's a pretty good starting point. Let's go ahead and do one more gradient. We're going to do something to the effect about here. And now we're going to invert that. So, and we are going to bring that exposure up just a touch too. Now typically, the brightest part of the image is what people look at. But when you're doing fine art stuff like this, you kind of want it to, everything's going to be really light on the outside and your eyes are going to fade to actually some of the darker stuff. It's the one exception to that rule. Like I said, we'll bring that exposure up just a touch. And I think we'll also go down to bring some of the texture back into that rock right here, this rock here, by adding some clarity and some texture to that. Bring some character back into this image, and we are just going to go ahead and open the image. Okay, so now we are into this image. Let's get rid of these sensor dust here. Now, nowadays, I used to do this a lot differently, but nowadays, this tool right here, this is the remove tool. I just click on that. It's on the latest version of Photoshop. I'm actually running the beta version, but that is available in the new version as well. So we're gonna just go over the sensor dust. I used to like clone stamp and all that stuff, but we're not going to do that this time. So just look around your image, make sure that there's something that needs removed. You don't have to go crazy because, again, this is going to be black and white, so we're going to lose some data as we go. But go through there. All that looks good. So all these little purple dots are going to be removed. You hit return, and away it goes, and boom. They look like they're done. So I'm going to zoom in, kind of, looks like there might have been one there. My actual screen is dirty, so sometimes oh, run away, there we go. And it's okay if you go over a little bit, like on this post. The remove tool will know that that post needs to go, or it needs to stay there, but the stuff next to it needs to go, excuse me. So we're going to click OK. Just looking over a little closer to this image. It looks like we're pretty good. So I'm going to zoom out. Now, I mean, honestly, this picture here, once you cropped it, it would probably be just fine, and you could color grade it and everything else, but we're going to make it into fine art, so we're going to select our crop, and so I start with like 16 by 9 just to kind of really see if that's the area I want. Using the rule of thirds, maybe I would move this up a little bit, see if that's interesting. I think that this rock right here doesn't need to be in the picture, so we're going to scale this in. We're going to get the little boathouse here right on that rule of thirds. I think we need just a little bit more sky here. Let's start with that. Let's see what a 16 by 9 looks like. I actually have a version of this picture that I've edited into fine art, and I really like it, but this is going to be a different crop. We're going to see if this crop leads our eyes where we want it to go. It looks like it. I'm going to pull guides down. Just make sure, yeah, it looks like we're straight there. This part here is not straight, this pillar. And that would probably drive me crazy on a full color picture, but I think it'll be okay. It adds some character to all this. So there's a few different things you could do from here. You could just go into, let me go into Camera Raw or Lightroom, it's fine. You could just go to, well, actually, let me go back here to the basic map, and you could just hit black and white, and you could look at this and you could tell really what you want to do. And so, like, if you want to cool the image down, the blues will actually turn kind of white and really get that little ghostliness. You could turn the reds up, and see that also fades to white. The problem with just a straight black and white is you don't get any dynamics. I mean, you can get them. You have to really tweak, your shadows and highlights and everything. And I like to bring some texture and clarity back to an image like this. But the problem is it starts looking really flat and it just doesn't quite work. So I'm going to cancel that. And you can go into those if you don't have these tools, but I do recommend Nik Collection software. One, because my son's name is Nick, spelled the same way, but two, they just make really good stuff. Their Silver Effex Pro, the very first thing that you see here, this black and white, is a neutral black and white. This is exactly what you would see in Lightroom or Adobe Camera Raw with a standard conversion. And they have a whole bunch of different things. You could just click away and see what you got. But if you look at this one, like, look how it darkened all this up, but you get this little ghostliness. It's a little much. Your eyes go right to the big black mark. You could do nice high structures. And you're in here. But what we're going to look for is kind of this high key look. And not really seeing. There we go. I think this is starting to look pretty close. I definitely think probably these darks right in here, these rocks, are a little too dark. I think they're really distracting. So what we're going to do is we're going to cancel this, and we're going to come in here, and this is the part of the process, is you're going to go, okay, now my eyes are drawn to something that I don't really want them to be drawn to. I want them to be drawn to this boathouse. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into Adobe Camera Raw, or if you don't have that, Lightroom. And what we're going to do is we're going to select, we're just going to go down to where it says Objects, and you just paint right over the things that you think it needs to adjust. So I think this one's too dark. I think this part's too dark too. For some reason it didn't select that, so we're just going to click it again. Yeah, that's good. And this one's a touch too dark. Might as well hit that. And I don't think this is in the picture, but we'll click it too. I'm going to click on here. Now I'm going to roll down. I'm going to up the exposure just a touch. And the big one is the highlight, or the shadows, excuse me. Get the shadows up just a bit. Get these highlights down. So you want to just kind of make this a little less distracting here. I think that's starting to look all right. I think we'll add some texture, linear gradient, and we're going to go over to this. We're going to go right up to the horizon line, and let's see here. We're going to go down to where it says dehaze, and we're just going to go negative dehaze, and that's going to accentuate the haziness right here. Instead of getting rid of it, we want to add to it. It's going to add just a little bit to this water. It's going to bring it back because there was some waves crashing in here, and that adds that nice like ghostly look to it. Okay, that looks like it's pretty balanced out. So we're going to hit OK. And now you can see some details in these rocks and stuff. A lot of that's going to go bye-bye. So what we're going to do is we're going to go Nik Collection, go to Silver Effects. And again, look at this. This is exactly what you'd get in Lightroom. So this is not bad. There's nothing wrong with this. You could say, okay, that's good. So if you didn't have Nik Silver Effects Pro, that's okay. What you can do is just have this be your starting point. But since I have Nik Silver Effects, this is not sponsored by the way, but I do like their software. I'm going to go through some of these presets. I'm going to click high contrast. That one's not bad right there. I'm going to show you some little tricks here because there's a little too much contrast in here. So I'm going to pass up on that one. But you could take this, process it. It'll do it in a new layer. You could take the opacity down and then you could double process it. But excuse me for coughing, by the way. Okay, this one's not bad, not bad. High structure smooth. We'll click on high key really quick. Probably a little too washed out. So even though we want some of that, it's probably just a touch too much. So let's, and you could go to these sliders over here. You know, you could add contrast to this. In this case, I think you'd have to bring it down just a little bit. You could amplify the whites up here. You could get really funky with it, but you know, if it's not exactly what you're looking for, just move on. There's a ton of presets in here. I think we're getting closer. I think this push process is one of my favorites. So if you compare it, there's a straight neutral. There's that. If you look, you'll see the sky starts getting washed out. I think that is looking good. If you look at these rocks, they're prominent, they're still dark, but you can see some of that texture in here now. You can see the texture in this rock here, and you still see that haziness. I think this is probably where we want to be. I'm going to scroll down just a little bit more. I'm going to try, that's too dark, so go back to that. Here's what, this is sampling a neutral density filter. It's a little dark. It's, part of that fine art process is really getting the whites. So here's a good one. It's full dynamic. So here's neutral, here's, I think this one might, I don't know, what do you think? So full dynamic smooth, oh, maybe full spectrum, no. Okay, so these are getting, here's a fine art process. Let's go ahead and, now see, it's not even right. So this one's getting closer. All right, so I think that push process was the one. So we're gonna go all the way back. Give me full process, harsh, or no, it's full dynamic. Where is it at? Full push process, there we go. There's a couple different ones. I think this one right here. So we don't want to lose any detail in this bridge going out. We want to keep the detail in the house. We want some of this detail in these rocks, even though I am going to add kind of a haze at the very end. But I think this is pretty good. So we're going to say yes. Now, like I said, you can go in here. You could say, oh, I want some more structure. You could bring the shadows out of this a little bit if you wanted to. These are just little fine tunings. I think the next process actually makes it look even more fine art. So, all right, we'll just stop there. I think that's a good point. You know, I want this to be a very easy process. Now, again, you could have did all this right into Adobe Camera Raw or in Lightroom, but the Nik Collection kind of just saves you a few steps. You don't have to tweak the sliders as much. I think you could get that software for under $100, so it is, and it comes with way more stuff than just black and white conversions. But I do think people struggle with converting black and white to make it look as dynamic as they want. So, looking at this, I'm going to zoom in, see if there's anything that just bugs me in the image. So here's a little speck here. Let's go ahead and go like this. Get rid of this little tool talk here. All right. There's a speck there. A lot of times when you convert something to black and white, you can see your sensor dust a lot better. Now, I was shooting a long exposure at probably f/22, so oh, there's a piece of sensor dust right there. So you start seeing these little things a lot better in black and white, and they'll show up if you wanted to print this. So if you look here, there's another one. Trust me, there's nothing worse than printing something and seeing it after you spent some money and you're like, man, if I would have spent 5 more minutes editing a picture. Sometimes it's just flaws that you see that were there, but they're just a distraction. They don't really matter, especially in the fine art aspect of things, because it doesn't have to be based in reality. It has to be based on what you saw in your mind. So I think that's pretty good there. Well, I'll hit this here. So there's little specks here and there that I could probably nitpick, but I think this is okay. So I hit OK. It's going to process. It's taking a little bit of time here, but that's okay. All right, I think we're getting closer to that fine art look, you know. What you're going to want to do is look at balance. So a lot of times I'll click on the crop tool. For some reason when you go back to Adobe Camera Raw, sometimes you get the whole image again. So I'm going to slide this over just a touch. I don't think we need all this sky, so we're going to get the boathouse kind of right there. I'm going to balance it right in about there. So we'll go to here, and you'll notice like this grays out around there. If you haven't done a lot of stuff with either Photoshop or whatever program you're doing, the crop tool should gray out the areas that are going to basically frame your picture. I'm going to I think this is good, so we're going to click on that. This is really starting to look like a nice piece of artwork. And you'll notice, like, if I copy all this and I hit new, if I went to just a piece of paper and we went to, we'll do tabloid, so we'll go pretty big, 11 by 17. Okay, so if this was going to be printed on 11 by 17 paper, I'm going to go ahead and paste this in, and we're going to bring this into the center of the paper. Let's say that's good. You'll notice that my whites are actually a shade of gray. You know, they're not totally white, and that's what you want. If you really want to over process and get extreme with the processing of the fine art aspect of this, and if you weren't going to have like a white border or a white frame around it, then let me go ahead and close this. We don't want to save it. Then you could start doing a secondary run into Camera Raw. And what I would do is, there's a couple different things you can do. You could go down to Effects, and you got Vignetting. Now, if you go negative, you're going to get dark. That is a look. That is something that some people really want. Maybe they want that moodiness. I wouldn't go near that extreme. And you can go like that, and that's going to darken the image and guide your eyes right into that boathouse. But I'm going to do the opposite. I'm going to add negative vignetting. I'm going to go white. So we're going to do just that really old time classic photography from, you know, maybe the 1800s or whatever, and really haze this background. That's one way to do this. Click off that. The other way is you could do radial gradient. You go in, and instead of making it exactly all over the print in the same spot, maybe you want to get a little funky with it. This is where the fine art aspect comes in. Is it's stuff that wouldn't necessarily happen through a camera's lens, but it happens in the camera lens that's in your brain. So we're gonna go somewhere in here. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna up the exposure, start hazing that out a little bit. And then, speaking of haze, we're gonna go all the way down. That's right. We're going to negative dehaze. So that's gonna blur it out a little bit, and it's going to bring in those whites. We might, around the edges, want to take the clarity down, take the texture down. And the nice way about doing this is it's not a perfect circle around the whole image. It actually, in this case, I think, guides your eyes right to this boathouse. So it's just a touch bigger. I like this rock here. Yeah, so I might even, I know I said I like the rock, but I might take this up just a touch. The way all the detail remains in the bridge and these rocks out here, but you get a little bit lightness around the edges. I like that. I think that's good. We'll go a bit more hazy. You could take your whites and you could say, hey, I don't want it to be bright white. You could take those down, or you could jump them up there. And notice in this area here, the fade out. So I think that's pretty good. Now I'm going to do one more thing. So we're going to add one more. I'm going to select objects, and I'm just going to select Boathouse down here. Let it do its thing. And we'll zoom in on that. Okay, so that gets all that. If we wanted to subtract like this water, I don't think it'll matter, but I'll show you how to do it anyway. You can just grab this brush and literally just brush over this. And slowly but surely subtract it. I think that's pretty good. Oh, so I'm actually going to bring the exposure just barely down, just a little bit, just because sometimes when you're pumping whites in, you start losing things. I'm going to bring down the highlights so you can adjust these pretty drastic at first and then just fine tune it. And you're like, somewhere just barely. And if you bring the shadows up, it makes it a little too much. If you bring them down, it's too much, so I think we'll just kind of leave those alone. But maybe the whites, we'll take them down just a touch. So I don't want to lose anything. And then adjust the black slider. You'll notice, I'll just crank it down a lot real quick. All this, when it starts turning blue like that, that means it's crushing those and you're losing all the data, so that's the wrong direction. So I'm just going to take this to the point where all that disappears. And then we're going to slide all the way down. We're going to bring up texture right there. We're going to bring up clarity just to make your eyes focus in on that house. Maybe even actually dehaze it. If you negative dehaze, you see this lighter. I'm going to bring it just a touch. 9 points. All right, I think that's pretty good. You see right here, there's a spot that'll need adjusted. With all those adjustments, it brought out characteristics that we don't want. So we'll take care of that here in a second. I think we need to zoom out. Yeah, so I'm really liking the haze around the outside. I'm liking the leading lines that go right here. It's okay that these things are starting to get lost because they're not what matters. What matters is this line that just draws you right into here. I think that's pretty good. So, like I said, we're going to hit OK. We're going to call that pretty good. And look at the difference here. So this is where we started. This is where we're at now. So let's take care of this little spot right here. So I'm going to go ahead and get my remove tool. These tooltips keep popping up. So I'm just going to go over this. I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to zoom out, see if there's anything else. Yeah, so that's looking pretty good. I'm not mad at it. So here we go. All right. So that would be a piece of fine art. Now, if this crop was not quite what you wanted, maybe you're like, I don't really want that panel look, that's okay. You've gotten the meat and the potatoes done, so go ahead and go to your crop. 4x6, rotate. Also, obviously, a pretty standard crop. It's what your camera would have saw. I think somewhere in that ballpark would make a pretty good crop over just a little bit. I think that would make a pretty good crop right there for if you just need standard printing. But as you can see, so this edge here, it's got a little bit of haze. It's got nice leading lines. It's very much a fine art print without going over the top. You could do this with anything, and I think it's got a really good flow. All right, so I'm going to take that, I'm going to copy it, I'm going to hit new. Let's go to photo on here, and we'll do your standard, we'll go landscape 8x10. I know we did it as a 4x6, but you'll see what I'm talking about here in a second. So you want to get this in here. We're going to paste. Go ahead and go. Guide this up to about here. And then if you want to get really fancy, I'm just going to go ahead and add my signature. The nice thing about Photoshop too is it'll snap it right to the center. You don't have to be precise and get out the measurements. I'm going to call this the finished product. And yeah, there's your Fine Art Friday.